Are Percy and Annabeth a match made in hell? Hello there, and welcome to today's video, where I'm going to be discussing the relationship between Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase throughout the Percy Jackson series. What makes a great fictional romance? Love at first sight? Dramatic confessions? For Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase, it was none of that. Instead, their love story was built on something much stronger. Years of friendship, trust, and just the right amount of bickering. Over the course of 5 books, we see them grow from reluctant allies to inseparable partners, proving that a well-written romance doesn't need to be rushed or forced to feel real. Despite being written for a younger audience, their relationship stands out as one of the most organic and well-developed in modern young adult fiction. So how did it happen? Let's take a look at the journey of Percy and Annabeth from the Lightning Thief all the way to the Last Olympian. The Lightning Thief sets a pretty important foundation for Percy and Annabeth, as they spend a large majority of the book at odds with one another. Annabeth sees Percy as a clueless newcomer, given the opportunity to leave Camp Half-Blood, something that she's desperate to do, that he doesn't necessarily deserve nor appreciate. This is further complicated by her belief that her and Percy just can't get along due to their godly parents' continued rivalry. Likewise, Percy finds Annabeth to be something of a know-it-all, and is laboring under the belief that either Grover or Annabeth is going to end up betraying him by the end of the quest, due to the Oracle's prophecy. But throughout their journey, they both learn to respect one another for the strengths they each bring to the table, and end up working together as a highly effective team, tempering each other's weaknesses and bolstering each other's strengths. More often than not, Percy is able to come up with a spark or an idea to get them out of their dire situation, but Annabeth is the requirement to turn it into a plan that will actually work. This is shown in the water park, where Percy is able to pull Annabeth out of a paralytic fear of spiders, and come up with the idea to get them off the Tunnel of Love ride safely. But Annabeth's intelligence is needed to actually execute the plan and get them to jump safely. Even in the underworld, Percy comes up with the idea to play with Cerberus as a way for them to get past the giant 3-headed dog. But it's Annabeth's experiences with training a puppy that enables them to actually get past the guard dog without having to do it the easy way. There's also the emotional trust they begin to build with one another, as Percy is able to convince Annabeth to open up about her issues with her father, and convince her to reunite with him by relating his own family struggles and the sacrifices his mom went through to keep him safe. The Lightning Thief ends with a mutual respect and trust built between the two friends, and the common goal of finding and stopping Luke. So how does their relationship evolve from there? The Sea of Monsters picks up pretty much where the Lightning Thief left off in terms of their relationship. They trust and respect each other, sure, but they're not quite close yet. We can see this when Percy tries to tell Annabeth that Grover is in trouble, and Annabeth just brushes him off, thinking that it's a trick Percy's trying to pull to distract her from the upcoming chariot race. But the Sea of Monsters is instrumental in bringing these two characters closer emotionally with one another. I mean, there's obviously their shared love of Chiron and their sense of loss when he's banished from the camp, but the scene that always strikes me as the first step on their journey to actually falling in love is when Annabeth insists on listening to the Siren's song. Percy gets a glimpse into Annabeth's ultimate desire to save Luke, reunite her parents, and rebuild the world from scratch. Afterwards, they share a really vulnerable moment where they discuss her vision and her fatal flaw. This scene creates a deeper emotional understanding between these two characters, and as far as I'm concerned, is the moment where Percy starts putting Annabeth in the same category as Grover. Now, what I mean is that in The Lightning Thief, and even The Sea of Monsters, it's established Percy really doesn't make and keep a lot of friends. And by knowing Grover for a full year, he's considered Percy's oldest friend. And putting Annabeth into this category becomes really important when we get to the next book, and how it mirrors Percy's actions to rescue Grover in the Sea of Monsters. Now, The Titan's Curse is a challenging book for Percy in many ways. He has to deal with his rivalry with Thalia, however you want to say it, his dislike of Zoe Nightshade, his promise to Nico D'Angelo to keep Bianca safe, and his desire to rescue Annabeth from Luke's clutches. See, that last one is really important, because it's Percy's driving force throughout the entirety of the novel. I mean, the other characters are worried about saving the goddess Artemis and stopping the Titan Atlas, but Percy's only goal throughout the story is saving Annabeth. If he happens to do the other stuff, that's just a bonus. See, there's a scene at the start of the novel that I think is more important than people give it credit for. And for the longest time, I was one of those people. When ranking the books, Sea of Monsters and The Titan's Curse have never been my favorites. But writing the script really kind of opened my eyes to just how big of a role they play in kind of the bigger story of the series. See, at the start of the book, Percy, Annabeth, and Thalia go to a military academy to find two half-bloods that Grover has located. When they do, they're forced to blend in at the school dance to avoid the nearby monster. And it's here at the dance that we see how Percy's adventures haven't changed him too much at his core. I mean, he sees a group of guys clearly embarrassed to be there and just milling around near the basketball hoops, and he empathizes with them, feeling that that's where he belongs in a setting like this. And that's important. It tells us immediately that Percy has stayed humble despite pretty much saving the world twice already. But it also shows us that Percy really lacks confidence in himself. Especially when Grover and Thalia go off to dance and Percy's left alone with Annabeth. He feels awkward and uncomfortable being left alone with his friend in a formal setting. And he starts to hyperfixate on small details about Annabeth, like her earrings and how her hair looks when it's left loose. In fact, made even more glaringly obvious when he's told to dance by Thalia, and he asks Annabeth who he should ask. I mean, naturally she sees this as a stupid question, saying he's supposed to dance with her. But as he does, Percy is doing everything in his power to focus on small, inconsequential things in his surroundings, to try not think about Annabeth. And I honestly think this is a coping mechanism for Percy, made even worse by his ADHD. And I think it's also a classic case of Percy's head kind of lagging behind his heart. Because in this scene, I think he's finally starting, at least subconsciously, to see Annabeth as an attractive girl his age, beyond just one of his closest friends. But, he doesn't really get a chance to address this because things then go to hell and Annabeth's captured and then, But, see, he's then able to hide those feelings as being protective in nature, just like with Grover the previous year. Because Percy does pursue her rescue with the same reckless abandon he did in the Sea of Monsters to go and save Grover from the Cyclops. But Percy's also kind of forced to confront those feelings when he's met by Aphrodite midway through the quest, who pretty much tells Percy that, hey, he has feelings for Annabeth, that she's rooting for the two of them, but that she's going to make it difficult. Now, Percy still doesn't really accept that what he's feeling towards Annabeth is romantic, but I think it becomes pretty clear for the reader, especially after they go through the shared experience of shouldering the weight of the sky, and then Percy damn near has a panic attack when he thinks that she's going to join the Hunters of Artemis and leave him behind for eternal maidenhood. I think it's safe to say that at this point, Percy is able to acknowledge that he has strong feelings for Annabeth, but not necessarily that those feelings have gone beyond platonic yet. So where does that take us in the next book? The Battle of the Labyrinth opens in a really interesting way as far as Percy and Annabeth's relationship is concerned. See, Percy and Annabeth have essentially organized the most classic date imaginable, in that they're going to go see a movie. But Percy's doing his best to persuade his mom that it's not a date. And here's the thing, it has all the hallmarks of a date, but I really don't think Percy is able to see it that way. And I think it's because of something I alluded to during the Titan's Curse. I think Percy is battling a sense of inferiority, a sense that he's not enough, and that Annabeth couldn't possibly think of him in that way. And when we examine how Percy's grown up, with an abusive stepfather, not knowing his dad, and with very few friends over the course of his life, I think it becomes really easy to see why Percy thinks that way. But, naturally things go to hell, and Percy and Annabeth are forced to cancel their date and flee for Camp Half-Blood. Then they have to go through a quest to navigate the Labyrinth, and it's here we really see some interesting progression in their relationship. Throughout the quest, they are operating as an incredibly efficient team. I mean, along with the rest of the group. But Luke quickly becomes a sore spot for them. They can barely discuss him without erupting into an argument. But, again, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Luke stuff's going to come a little bit later, and possibly even in another video as well. But there are two moments that I think really do a lot to open Percy's eyes in terms of how he feels about Annabeth. The first is under Mount St. Helens, when Percy decides to recklessly distract the Telkynes, and Annabeth, thinking that Percy is rushing to his death, kisses him for luck. This absolutely stuns Percy, and is honestly one of my favorite chapters in the series. But the second moment occurs shortly after this, when Percy returns from Calypso's island to find Annabeth and the rest of the camp grieving his supposed death. See, I've focused a lot on Percy so far throughout the video. I mean, obviously he's a POV character throughout the series. But I think a lot of people forget to take Annabeth's perspective into account when viewing their relationship. See, we find out in Heroes of Olympus that Annabeth has had a crush on Percy since she was 12 years old. And with that perspective in mind, I want to look at these two scenes from her point of view. See, Annabeth just kissed Percy under the belief that he was going to die. She made herself incredibly emotionally vulnerable in a high-stress moment. A moment that, for 2 weeks, no doubt haunted her every waking moment. And then he arrives back, as if nothing even happened. But here's the thing. Chiron makes it pretty clear that Annabeth has pretty much guessed where Percy was. And the thing about Calypso's island is that Calypso is doomed to fall in love with the heroes who end up there. But that process also works in reverse, which means that Annabeth has guessed just how close Percy was to leaving her forever. And the whole book she's been laboring under the Oracle's prophecy that she's going to lose a love to a fate worse than death. And then, Percy throws salt on the wound by suggesting they take Rachel Elizabeth Dare, an attractive mortal girl that Percy already ended up in a kind of weird scenario with at the start of the book, on what was supposed to be Annabeth's quest. This makes Annabeth extraordinarily jealous. A fact that Chiron will explain later as Annabeth being very territorial over her friends. But see, I think it also goes beyond that. I think Annabeth's upbringing has left her feeling like she's always abandoned and left alone with no one to really trust and rely on. I think it's one of the reasons that she wants to design a monument that will last for 1,000 years. But Percy is the one constant in her life amongst all of the changes. He's reliable, and he's already proven that he'll move heaven and earth quite literally to be there for her. So she spends the rest of the book sniping at Rachel out of jealousy and probably some heavy frustrations at the fact that Percy isn't really acknowledging their kiss at all. Something I have no doubt Percy just sees as a high-stress moment thing only. And then Luke becomes Kronos' new host, confirming the Oracle was right and that she would lose a love to a fate worse than death. And her feelings for Luke just cause more issues with Percy. So of course, the discussion of Annabeth's emotional journey would really not be complete without addressing the series' most persistent obstacle. Luke. See, Luke is the complication in Percy and Annabeth's relationship that never seems to go away. I mean, it's established all the way back in The Lightning Thief that Annabeth has a crush on Luke. And that fact becomes even more of an obstacle the more her and Percy's relationship grows. Especially because Percy can't help but see Luke as the enemy. But Annabeth's got all this history with the guy, and it's Annabeth's feelings for Luke and Percy's subconscious jealousy at that knowledge that really throws the initial spanner in the works of what otherwise should have been a relatively easy path to a relationship. It's the issue they agree on the least throughout the Battle of the Labyrinth, and it's one of the greatest hurdles that they need to overcome to actually cement themselves as more than a friend. But to do that, they need to defeat the Titan Lord Kronos. Once again, The Last Olympian opens in a really interesting place insofar as Percy and Annabeth are concerned, because Percy has been spending a lot of time with Rachel. The two of them have gotten really close since the last book, with Rachel effectively asking Percy to kiss her, and Percy absolutely panicking before being rescued by the arrival of Beckendorf. In this moment, Percy even acknowledges that he finds Rachel easier to be around, because she makes her feelings clearer than some other people. And the closeness between Percy and Rachel is not lost on Annabeth. There's a moment when they go to inspect the various cabins together that sees the two end up alone in the Athena cabin. And I mean, the sexual tension is clearly high. Even Percy is feeling it, rather acutely, not helped by the fact that Annabeth is clearly trying to talk about the state of their relationship. When she starts to talk about how Beckendorf's death makes you think about the important things in life, especially the important people in life. And once again, Percy's coping mechanism is flaring up. And he makes it worse by constantly putting his foot in his mouth. But his biggest misstep is when he asks for advice on the weird dreams he's having about Rachel, which causes her to blow up at him and call him a coward. Now, when I first read this, when I was a lot younger, I was totally on Percy's side and thought all of this was coming out of nowhere. But, over many rereads, I've come to be able to appreciate how Annabeth must be feeling in this moment. I mean, she's already kissed him, pretty much spelling out how she feels, and Percy just hasn't caught the hint. Instead, he's going around spending time with the person Annabeth clearly views as a romantic rival. She calls Percy a coward because she thinks he's not willing to admit his feelings for her. Or worse, that he's just stringing her along, unwilling to make the hard call and just reject her outright. But then, Percy takes a dip in the sticks, and has all of his qualities magnified. And I think this causes his recklessness and battle prowess to increase, yes, but I also think it boosts his confidence and allows him to confront his feelings more head-on, especially after he envisions Annabeth as his tether to the mortal world. I mean, he even jokes with Annabeth during the battle for Manhattan about getting another kiss, as that's kind of tradition. I think this really shows Annabeth that Percy really does have romantic feelings for her, especially after he's willing to face the brunt of an enraged god's wrath to protect her, but there's still a water fight. And the two get even closer when Percy shares his Achilles heel with her after she saved him from getting stabbed there. All of the trust, respect, and emotional closeness reaches its culmination in this book, with Percy turning down the reward of becoming a god for saving Olympus. Saving Olympus only because he trusted Annabeth enough with her judgment on Luke. And when he, turns down the godhood, he makes it pretty clear to everyone in the room that he's doing it so that he can spend his life with Annabeth. So with Rachel out of the way, as the new Oracle, Percy and Annabeth are finally able to start their relationship properly. At the end of The Last Olympian, Percy and Annabeth finally came together. Not in a dramatic, whirlwind romance, but in a way that feels earned. Their relationship is the product of years of shared danger, growth, vulnerability, and mutual respect. It's a romance that doesn't shout, but speaks volumes in the way they trust each other, challenge each other, and always choose each other over and over and over again. What makes their relationship so damn compelling isn't just that they fall in love, but how they fall. Slowly, unevenly, with setbacks, missteps, and moments of real emotional weight. It reflects something a lot deeper than the typical young adult love story. It's not about instant chemistry or destiny, but about two people who grow together, even when the world around them is falling apart. And yet, even after all they've been through, their story is far from over. Because falling in love's only the beginning. It's staying in love, especially when the gods aren't done with you. That's another matter entirely. In part 2, we'll explore how Percy and Annabeth's relationship is tested like never before. From new demigods and deeper betrayals to literal trips through hell. I mean, again, right? Their love is pushed to its breaking point. Somehow, against all odds, it survives. Thank you for watching, guys. This video is actually part of a two-parter because the script just got absolutely massive, and I want to see if I can kind of keep the Friday videos to a reasonable length these days. But part 2 will pretty much just explore the Heroes of Olympus aspect of Percy and Annabeth's relationship, as well as maybe the college graduation series, but that's not really complete yet, so it's a bit up in the air how much of that I'll use. Thank you for watching.